About the idea of something that spreads. Haggai chapter 2 is extremely interested in this idea of how things spread. We're really used to this idea of contagious right now, right? So we're always thinking about, okay, what has touched this is spread. But we know, I think, most of us have experienced that it's not just physical disease that spreads. Have you ever had a friend who had a bad attitude? And they like to complain, and they like to gossip, and they like to find things to argue about. Have you noticed something about that attitude? It's contagious. Very quickly, you have one person that starts out with a sour attitude, and then you've got two, and then you've got three, and then suddenly there's an epidemic. And I have pastor friends who have experienced that in churches where you get some people who are divisive and bickering and stuff, and it starts out with a handful of people, and then next thing you know, the whole church is in shambles. It happens that attitudes are contagious. This happens in a positive sense too, of course. We know that there's a positive attitude that's contagious. But I've got a bad news spiritual law for you. And it's that, and I decide to pull you up on the stage, who's going to win? Whoever's trying to pull me to the floor is going to win, right? It's easier to pull somebody down than pull somebody up. Because you have to go against nature to pull somebody up. Gravity is fighting against you. And we as human beings, because we're sinners, we have a tendency to go down. And so to pull somebody up, I've got to fight against nature. I'm going against where they are, and I'm going against their natural tendency. And so sin is contagious. And so Haggai is speaking about this law of the Old Testament, explain how incorruption spreads versus how holiness spreads. And then Haggai chapter 2, verse 10. The scripture says, "In the 24th day of the 9th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, ask now the priests concerning the law, saying, If one bear holy flesh in the skirt of his garment, and with his skirt do touch bread or pottage or wine or oil or any meat, shall it be holy? And the priests answered and said, No. Then said Haggai, If one that is unclean by a dead body touch any of these, shall it be unclean? And the priests answered and said, It shall be unclean. Then answered Haggai and said, So is this people, and so is this nation before me, saith the Lord. And so is every work of their hands. And that which they offer there is unclean. And now I pray you, consider from this day and upward, from before a stone was laid upon a stone in the temple of the Lord. Since those days were, when one came to a heap of 20 measures, there were but 10. When one came to the press vat for to draw out 50 vessels out of the press, there were but 20. I smote you with blasting and with mildew and with hail and all the labors of your hands, yet ye turn not to me, saith the Lord. Consider now from this day and upward, from the 4th and 20th day of the 9th month, even from the day that the foundation of the Lord's temple was laid." And Haggai said, I was really interested, so I've been reading Haggai, and I just do not understand the 2nd chapter. Because it presumes a lot of background knowledge. And to try to understand the point Haggai is making is kind of complex. Here is our big idea this morning, and I think that when we get the core idea, that all of the other stuff will be a little bit clearer. We are affected by what we come into contact with. Now we say, duh, of course we're affected by what we come into contact with. But the truth is that we don't always act like we're affected by what we come into contact with. By that I mean that maybe during the pandemic, everybody has got good physical hygiene. You wash your hands and you're careful of things like that. But sometimes we don't have very good